Now we're going to do the exercise I was referring to where we compare the various oligopoly models. Here we have, just as a given, a demand function, 1,000 minus the sum of Q1 and Q2, and the cost function are identical for each of the competitors, equal to 4Q of whatever competitor it is. And then we're going to ask for what are the outputs, prices, and profits for the various conditions we just did. So let's calculate these items for the Cournot equilibrium. So Q1 is equal to this function here in general with this data. So A is 1,000 minus C1, which is given at 4, divided by 2B, which is 2 times the coefficient from here, which is 1, minus 0.5 Q2. Now, in this case, we're also given that the Q's are identical, and therefore we can just replace the Q2s and Q1s with just Q, and we solve this function, and we get to Q equals 332. So at equilibrium, Q1 equals Q2, which equals 332. The price at this point is based on this function here, 1,000 minus 332 plus 332, because they're identical, equals 336. So that's the price. And the profit equals the revenue, which is the price 336 times the quantity of 332 minus the cost, which is given here, of 4 times the quantity, or 4 times 332, and the profit is 110, 224. And that is the profit for each of the two competitors, since they have the same cost structure and the same volume sold. Under the Stackelberg, we see here's the formula, and here is the specifics. So again, we'll plug in the numbers based on this generic formula and the data provided. So we start with the leader, because this is one where the leader sets and then the follower follows. So the leader is output right here. So A is 1,000, C2 is 4, that's right there, minus 2 times C1, and here the C1s are identical for 1 and 2, so 2 times 4, and that quantity is divided by 2B, so 2 times B, which is given here as 1 right there, the coefficient. So we solve this out and we get this number, 498. Given that the move was made by the leader, the follower now goes to their function, and it's right here. So A, 1,000 minus C2, which is right here, 4, divided by 2 times B, the coefficient right there, minus half of Q1. And now we know Q1. Q1 is 498. We solve that math, and we end up with 249. So in this case, leader gets more, follower gets less. The price is set. Now we can look at 1,000 minus the sum of Q1, Q2, and the price is now 253. Now the profits will be different because the leader is going to get more volume. So they're going to get 253 times their volume of 498 minus the cost function, which is 4 times their quantity of 498. They make 124,002. The follower then has their price, which is the same price, 253, times their quantity, which is a lower quantity of 249, times, again, the same function of 4 times the quantity they sell. So this leads to 62. So stepping back from this, the leader gets more volume, the leader gets more profit, the follower then bases their move on their reaction function at the point of the move first made by the leader. So the Bertrand reaches equilibrium where the price equals marginal cost, and the price just keeps dropping until that happens. Here we know that the marginal cost is 4 right there, so therefore we can plug in the expression for price and make it equal to 4. So 4 equals 1,000 minus the total of the quantity. 4 equals 1,000 minus the total quantity. So solving for total quantity, we get 1,000 minus 4, or 996. And in this case, they're symmetrical and the same, therefore the same size. So Q1 equals Q2, and the sum equals the total. So they split it. So out of the 996, each will get 498. And the profit is also the same because they have the same costs. So they have 498, which is the quantity, times the price of 4, minus 4 times their quantity of 498, and that equals 0. So what we see in the Bertrand oligopoly, which is quite as important, is that it behaves as if it were perfect competition, where the price to the consumer ends up at the marginal cost. And if we have that condition, there is zero economic profit for firms A and firm B. Next, we'll look at what happens with collusion. Here we have the information provided, and we note that in a collusion scenario, the firms act together as if they were a monopoly. Remember, there's no cheating here. They're acting in collusion to act like a monopoly. In this case, they will be on the demand curve so that their marginal revenue equals 1,000 minus 2Q. And again, maximizing profit, marginal revenue equals marginal cost. So we took 1,000 minus 2Q equals their marginal cost, which is 4. We solve it for a Q of 498. So they split it, and it's 249 for each party. The price then becomes, again, based on this function, 1,000 minus 249 minus 249. And at that pricing level, they each will face the same price of 502. They each will have the same volume of 249. So the profit equals the revenue, 502 times 249, minus the cost of 4 times 249. And the result is they each make 124,002. We also see that the markets may, on the other side, may be contestable. And what we mean by contestable is that all producers have access to the same technology. So they all can essentially have the same cost structure. Consumers can react quickly to price changes. So there is a lot of information, and those with a superior price will get the volume. So it creates a very high competition and efficient marketplace. And existing firms cannot respond quickly to entry by lowering price. And there are no sunk costs. So this is a condition which allows for very fluid movement in and out as far as competition. And the prices will always go straight down to the point where there's a lot of market power in the hands of consumers. And they will then drive for a more favorable result for consumers and less power for the firms. Concluding now, the learning objectives for Chapter 9, we're looking at how the beliefs and strategic interaction shape how oligopolies work. We saw different conditions where a firm can operate, and we saw variations of Sweezy, Cournot, Stackelberg, and Bertrand. And we also looked at the ramifications for pricing, quantity, outputs, and therefore profits for the firms. We also looked at the reaction or best response functions for looking at what actions would take place from the firms in the industry and based on the quantities from their competitor. We also saw that there are incentives for collusion and also incentives to cheat if you have collusion. And finally, we looked at what makes a contestable market, which creates market power to the consumers, and what implications it has to the long-run profits for the firm.